Hey guys, and welcome back. This is part 3 in our series of understanding the ECG, going from 0 to hero. In our past 2 videos we looked at how the ECG works and the leads, what it's made of, how it works, and today's video in part 3 we will discuss how the leads actually correspond to the heart. This is important because it serves as a stepping stone for our next video, in which we will cover the basic ECG trace. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here in front of you, you have an example of a standard ECG paper. And on this paper, you can see some of what you recognize from the last video, the different types of leads. We have over here the bipolar or limb leads, we have the augmented leads here, and we have the precordial leads here. All in all, the 12 leads are represented on this 12 lead ECG paper. Okay, so now let's start assigning some directions to our leads. Let's start off with the limb leads. So here are your 3 leads. Lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. Right arm, and left leg. Okay? So now if you remember in the first video, I told you each lead needs to be thought of as an eyeball. The reason is this. The reason you should think of it as an eyeball because it helps you to determine the direction the lead is going in. Okay, so here is our eyeball. So for lead 1, our eyeball is looking at lead 1 coming towards the eyeball, and where is this lead coming to? It's coming to the left side. Alright? Now because it's coming to the left side, we can say lead 1 is a lateral lead. Alright? So let's say lead 1 is a lateral lead. Let's look at lead 2 and lead 3. Let's assign our eyeballs. Now the question is, where in the perspective of the eyeballs is the lead coming to? Well, both lead 2 and lead 3 seem to be going in the same sort of direction. And what is that direction? Inferior. Inferior to what? Inferior to the heart. Okay, so just look at the eyeballs. They're looking upwards at the heart. Upwards, right? They're looking upwards at the heart. So these are our inferior leads. So we have inferior leads. Inferior leads. And let's assign lead 2 and lead 3. Alright. So that is our bipolar limb leads. Now let's do the same for our augmented unipolar leads. Okay, so as we know, we have our central terminal and leads that go to our AVR, so right side, AVR, to our left, like this, AVL, and like this, AVF. So now let's again assign our eyeballs. And where is this lead going? In the perspective of our eyes, we can see the lead going towards the what? The right side. Okay? What about AVL? AVL, let's see, our eyeball is going towards the left. So this is left. Or lateral. What about AVF? This is going, let's get our eyeball, it's going underneath the heart. So let's call this inferior. Alright? So now let's assign our directions. So AVL is going towards the lateral side. So let's put AVL. How about AVF? AVF is inferior. So let's assign this to our inferior leads, AVF. How about the right? Although it is going towards the right, we don't really use leads specifically for right. And so when it comes to AVR, we just leave that out. We don't assign a direction to AVR. Alright? Okay. So now that is done, let's move on to the precordial. Okay, so here is your central terminal, V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, and V6. V1 to V6 can actually split into two directions, okay? So let's actually put our precordial leads down, V4, V5, and V6. So there's a reason I've put V5 and V6 in another color than V1 to V4, because V1 to V4 is pointing or is allocated to a specific direction, and V5 and V6 is pointing or allocated to another direction. So V1 to V4, V1 to V4, these leads, if you look at where they are pointing towards and keep it in mind they are our horizontal sort of 3D leads, V1 to V4 is pointing in the anterior or septal direction in association with the heart. Okay? They are our anterior or septal leads. Some people say V1 to V2 is more septal and V3 to V4 is more anterior. But to make things simple, let's categorize it as anterior septal. And so, finally, V5 and V6, if you look at where they're pointing, generally they're pointing in this sort of direction. And what did we say this direction over here is? We said they are lateral. So now let's start filling in our leads. So lateral, we know our precordial V5 and V6, they are lateral. And anterior septal, anterior or septal, they are V1 to V4. Alright, so there we have it. We have our lateral, inferior, and anterior septal leads. These are all the directions you guys need to know. Alright, lateral, inferior, and anterior septal. So now, let's actually put this back into our ECG and see if we have understood. Alright, so now let's start off by filling in our lateral leads. Okay, lateral leads. So what did we say are the lateral leads? Okay, so the lateral leads, what were they? They were lead 1, right? So lead 1. There was also AVL, right? AVL. And what else? There was V5 and V6, right? Of our precordial leads. They also went in the lateral direction. So here we have all our lateral leads. Lead 1, AVL, V5, and V6. Perfect. Alright. So that's our first group. Now our second group is our inferior. So now let's start putting in our inferior leads. Alright, so inferior leads, what were they? Lead 2. Okay. And also lead 3, right? They were both pointing towards left leg. So that's inferior. Okay, and what else? AVF. AVF was also pointing in the inferior direction. Okay, so now what's the remaining lead? Well, this is our anterior septal leads. Okay, so remember we had V1, V2, V3, and V4. V1, V2, V3, and V4, they are our remaining precordial leads that were our anterior septal leads. So you also may have seen AVR does not have an assigned direction. The reason being is because it's the only one of its lead that actually goes in the right direction. So we just leave it alone. Okay. Alright, so now let's see, are we actually right in our decisions here? Okay, so as you can see, we are definitely right. Lateral leads, inferior leads, anterior septal leads, and how they correspond to the ECG over here. So now we've discussed the leads and their directions, but why is this all important? So let's go through an example. Let's talk about a heart attack or an MI. Here we have a blockage in one of our coronary arteries, and as you can see, this is an image showing the blood supply of the heart. We see the right and the left coronary artery, of which gives off branches to a certain portion of the myocardium. Now let's imagine one of these becomes blocked. Would we be able to see this on the ECG? The answer is yes, because we know the directions of the leads and how it corresponds to the heart. So if there was a problem in one of the coronary arteries supplying a certain area of the heart, let's say the left side or the inferior side, there's a blockage, we will be able to see this on the ECG. So let's actually talk about the coronary arteries and the portion it supplies. So let's talk about the lateral side of the heart, the lateral myocardium. Which coronary artery over here supplies the lateral aspect? That would be the LCX or the left circumflex artery, as you see over here. This is a branch from our left coronary artery over here. Okay, so now let's move on to the anterior septal portion of the myocardium. Which coronary artery supplies this? This is again a branch from the left coronary artery, the LAD, the left anterior descending, as you see over here. And finally, the inferior portion of the myocardium. Which coronary artery supplies this? Finally, the inferior portion of the heart, and this is supplied by the right coronary artery, more specifically the posterior descending artery. You can see the right coronary artery gives off a branch, the right marginal, but it continues on, loops around the heart, and continues its course inferiorly but posteriorly as well. So as we discussed, these aspects, the lateral, anterior, septal, inferior, they all have a certain lead. Alright, so now let's put this into practice. Let's imagine we have a blockage in our left circumflex artery. How would we know that on the ECG? Well, there would be an ST elevation in our lateral leads. Don't worry, we'll go into STEMIs and the rest of the diseases later on in the course. So what are the leads corresponding to the lateral portion? Well, as we mentioned, lead 1, our AVL, V5, and V6. If we found an ST elevation in those leads, we can then deduce there is a possibility that there is a blockage in our left circumflex artery. Okay? And if that's so, you would categorize this as a lateral MI. Okay? A lateral myocardial infarction. Same thing with if there was a blockage in our LAD. What are the leads corresponding to the anterior septal portion? Well, we know that's V1 to V4. If there was a blockage in our LAD, we would see this on the ECG paper in our V1 to V4. We would see an ST elevation sign. And if that's the case, we can categorize this as a anterior or septal MI. Okay? And then finally, if we have a blockage in our right coronary artery, and we saw this on the ECG through our inferior leads, we saw this on lead 2, on lead 3, on lead AVF, we saw this, we would categorize this as a inferior MI. Alright, so this is the reason why this is a important idea to be aware of. Okay. Alright guys, so this is the end of the video. We have discussed today how does the leads actually correspond to the heart. We looked at the specific directions and also gave the example about a myocardial infarction. So in the next video, we will actually discuss the basic ECG trace and how it corresponds to the heart. So in the next video, you can expect to see how do we actually generate this classic P QRST waveform, and also the idea about net vectors. If you guys did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.